It's account review time! Hey everyone, Shark here, and we got some overwhelmingly positive responses for account reviews. There are literally hundreds of submissions and it will take me a really long time to get through them all, so please be patient. In the meantime, make sure to watch these videos because even if it takes a while for me to get to your specific account, the information here is still valuable to understanding how to build characters and how to put a team together. And obviously, since there are a ton of accounts to review, you can check the other account review videos that I'll have in a special playlist for an even better understanding of how to build characters, teams, and progress your account. With all that being said, it is a lot of work to review literally hundreds of accounts, so if you could like the video, it would really mean a lot to me. It takes hours and hours of work for me, but all I need is a quick tap of that thumbs up button from you. And now that you've liked the video, let's jump into the account reviews. So you want to know some character builds, you like using Kaya, Zhao, Scaramouche, Kaching, Yanfei, Layla, Xingqiu, and Heizo. Oh, pretty good. But you don't like using bow users. Well, I don't think you'll need to use too many with this team. And there's your UID. So let's see what you're working with. Oh, well, your character details are hidden, so I can't look at anything. Unfortunately, we'll have to skip you, Lamoni, and go on to someone else. The next person in the current 900 submissions for account reviews wants some Abyss help and likes using Hu Tao and Tighnari, so let's see what they've got going on. Alright, and here we are with Free to Play King. I think we've got a pretty good setup. Let's take a look. Your Hu Tao looks pretty good. A couple things I would suggest for you though. Definitely get the Staff of Homa to 90. It's definitely worth it. It'll give you higher base attack and more crit damage. I also recommend getting a crit rate headpiece instead of a crit damage headpiece. 19% crit rate is pretty low, so you definitely want to bump that up a bit, and with a crit rate headpiece this will bump up to 50%, so you'll be 50-200, which will be pretty good ratio. And even though this rolled into crit rate a couple times, it also rolled into attack, which isn't super useful for Hu Tao since her base attack is pretty low anyways. And the best part is, since you already have 5 pieces of Crimson Witch, you can replace this headpiece with a crit rate headpiece, and even if it's mediocre and just gives you something like energy recharge and maybe HP percent, Hu Tao would still appreciate that, and you'd bump your crit rate up quite a bit so you could be a lot more consistent. Your pyro damage goblet isn't necessarily the best either, but I think having a better crit rate piece would do more for you than having a better pyro damage goblet at this point. Then finally, after you got her weapon to 90 and got a crit rate headpiece, I would level her burst up too. It is useful, so I would want to take it at least to 8. Alright, let's move on to Xingqiu, Hu Tao's support. C6, level 69, 4-piece emblem, very nice. Oh, wow. You have a crit rate headpiece with crit damage, HP percent, and energy recharge. You should definitely use this on Hu Tao. Yeah, just swap this piece over here, and then you can find another crit rate piece for Xingqiu. You definitely want to level his sacrificial sword to level 90, it'll increase his energy recharge by about 11%, and it'll increase the base attack so he'll hit harder as well. After that, you'll definitely want to ascend Xingqiu and get his talents up at least to level 8, so you want to make him at least 80 ascended, get these to 8 which will make each one 11, and then he'll hit a lot harder. But overall, pretty good. Energy recharge looks pretty good. Your hydro damage goblet isn't leveled up, but when you level it up, it will get a little bit better. Same thing with your attack sands, which is fine because you have enough energy recharge being C6 and having an R1 sacrificial sword, which isn't super consistent compared to like an R3 sacrificial sword, but at this energy recharge and C6, it should be plenty for you. You're already running the 4-piece emblem of the Severed Fate, so it seems like you know how to build Xingqiu. It just gets to the point where you actually have to invest the resources into him. You also mentioned that you like Tighnari, and it looks like you've got your Tighnari spread team here with Fischl and Kuki Shinobu, so let's take a look at this. 79 out of 80, stringless, 3 pieces of Wanderer's Troop. Okay, a couple things here. The first is that you may have a Wanderer's Troop flower that ends up being pretty good. You could get those from weekly bosses or for farming from other characters, so be on the lookout for that because your other pieces are pretty decent, and usually the flowers and feathers are the easiest pieces to get with good substats, so if you get that, then you'll get a 4-piece Wanderer's Troop set for him, which will be really nice. The second thing is that you do have the stringless on him, and while his skill and burst do good damage even though you don't have his skill leveled up, I would actually recommend putting this on someone like Fischl instead, who could get a little more use out of it in a Tighnari team. Instead of using the stringless for him, you could craft the prototype Crescent, or if you had something like the Windbloom Ode, which was an event weapon that gives you elemental mastery but also increases your attack after you use a skill, that would be perfect for Tighnari. Beyond that, your artifacts are not all quite leveled up, and they're mostly at plus 16, which is fine. If you don't have enough resources to get your artifacts to plus 20, you definitely want to keep them at plus 16 because it's about the same amount of resources to go from plus 16 to 20 as it is to go from plus 0 to plus 16 on a 5-star artifact. However, if you level up this crit headpiece, and if you get a nice Wanderer's Troop flower with some decent subsets like this gilded flower, it could be quite nice for you too. However, you never want to try to force a 4-piece set, and while your pieces are pretty decent here, if you do end up finding another gilded piece that's really good, you can just do 2-piece gilded, 2-piece Wanderer's Troop, and that'll be fine for Tighnari instead of just going for the 4-piece Wanderer's Troop. Beyond that, if you do want to go to the upper floors of the Abyss, you're going to need a level 90 weapon, you want to get him to level 80 Ascended, and you want to get his talents to at least 8. Overall, pretty decent. You've had some unfortunate rolls into some flat HP, but some of your artifacts are looking pretty good, especially this EM Sands. Now let's take a look at Tighnari's support, Fischl. Alright, Fischl is using a Favonius Warbow, has Glad Shiminawa. Okay, a few things to make Fischl a little bit better. One, I would give her the stringless. The EM with Fischl, especially in a Tighnari team with Dendro, is actually pretty nice. Not only are you going to do the quicken reaction, that will make Oz deal more damage, as well as Tighnari. And since the EM both greatly benefits the spread and aggravate, as well as the damage percent bonus that the stringless gives Oz, then it's a really good weapon on her. Favonius weapons are always really nice, but I don't think you'll need much energy recharge on your team because you've got 125% on Tighnari. He's used on field and his burst cost is only 40, so you should be able to use it pretty consistently. So I'd swap weapons, look for an electro damage goblet. It will be better than just an attack percent goblet on Fischl. Get her crit rate up with a crit rate headpiece instead of a crit damage headpiece. Do her level 80 Ascension, get Oz to level 8, and make sure the stringless you give her is level 90. This will give her a good mix of crit rate, crit damage, attack, and elemental mastery, which are all the things she really wants in a Tighnari spread team. Next, let's move on to your other Electro support, Kuki Shinobu. Ah, nice. Kuki is your Deepwood holder. I was wondering which character you'd have this on, and this is very smart. You want Kuki to run something like the Deepwood set for Tighnari because you want a character outside of Tighnari to typically run it. Deepwood is very good for him, but he'll do better with something like Gilded Dreams or the Wanderer's Troop set. But the Deepwood memory set isn't valuable for any Dendro on-field DPS, but since the passive works off-field, or the set effect works off-field, you want someone who is off-field and has support to typically run it. In this case, you're using Kuki Shinobu to run the 4-piece Deepwood memory set for Tighnari, and that's a really good idea, and I would definitely recommend that. And if you get a character like Kokomi and want to use her in a Hyper Bloom team, giving her a set like Deepwood is perfectly fine as well. That being said, you do need one more piece to complete your Deepwood set. So just go for some Deepwood headpiece. The main stat and substats honestly don't really matter that much. It's mostly for the 4-piece set effect. This is one of the few times with Deepwood or Viridescent that generally it's better to have the 4-piece set even if the main stat and substats are subpar. You almost never want to force a 4-piece set on your damage dealer, but if a set has a really useful effect for your entire team and you're going to put it on a support who's not really meant to do a lot of damage anyways, then it's totally fine to give them a 4-piece supporting set. Now, just because Kuki isn't going to deal a lot of damage for you right now, it doesn't mean that she can't in a Tighnari team. What I would recommend trying to go for Miss Kuki Shinobu is getting a 4-piece Deepwood set with triple EM. This will not only make her heal stronger, but it'll also create more powerful reactions when she hits Dendro to create stronger aggravates. You can also give her the craftable 4-star weapon, the Iron Sting, or the event weapon, the Tokabu Shigure, which gives you EM as its substat, because you don't really need to use Kuki's burst off cooldown. With those changes, it's not hard to get Kuki Shinobu to over 800 elemental mastery. And while in aggravate teams you do want crit and attack percent, you don't need to go for those and you don't need to bash your head against the wall trying to find the perfect EM rolled artifacts with attack percent and crit rate and crit damage. Elemental Mastery is already the least likely main stat to get on an artifact, so you don't need to completely struggle just trying to get superb substats with main stat Elemental Mastery Deepwood pieces. Just building high EM is fine, you'll still do plenty of damage, and if you decide to take Kuki Shinobu in a Hyper Bloom team, with this much Elemental Mastery you could expect to be hitting for around 30,000 per Hyper Bloom. So get her a 4th Deepwood piece, try to go for EM Deepwood pieces over time, give her an Iron Sting or a Takabu Shigure, and then definitely level her up, ascend her, and level up her ring, which is the most important talent she has. And if you do end up running Kuki in a transformative team, aka a Hyper Bloom team, you want to get her to level 90 because her level actually will matter at that point. Next, let's move on to Sucrose. A Widsith Sucrose. This is interesting. So for Sucrose, you definitely want a 4-piece Viridescent set, and similar to Kuki Shinobu, EM. As much EM as you can. You can give her Sacrificial Fragments. If you don't have that, you can give her a Favonius Codex to help recharge your team's energy. And if you don't have that, you can give her the Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayers to buff one of your characters with a supreme amount of attack. And while the Widsith can give you a ton of Elemental Mastery, it is a 1 in 3 chance and it has a very long cooldown, so I would go for a more consistent option. And her talents are level 1, which is totally fine for Sucrose because she doesn't need to level them up. You can keep them all at level 1 because all of her damage is coming from Swirl, and none of the talent damage actually matters for that. So if you want to invest in Sucrose, I would recommend taking her to level 90 because she does Swirl and that is a transformative reaction, so the level does actually matter, and then you just want to get as much Elemental Mastery on her as possible. If you can get some energy recharge, that would be great too, but really she just needs 4-piece Viridescent and as much EM as you can give her. But you may not want to prioritize building Sucrose right away. I would prioritize building characters like Tighnari, Xingqiu, and Kuki Shinobu first. We'll talk about a really good team that you can use Sucrose in, and it's actually a Hu Tao team. But before we go on to teams, let's take a look at your Diona and your Mona. Alright, Diona's got a Sacrificial Bow, 1/4/1, she's got Emblem of the Severed Fate, 5 pieces, and a Cryo Damage Goblet, very interesting. For Diona, I actually like running a 4-piece Noblesse set on her, so she increases the party's attack after she uses her burst, and I really like using an Energy Recharge Sands and then double HP Goblet, HP Headpiece. That makes her shields a lot stronger, but it also increases the potency of her heals. And because you do have some crit rate, you can give her the Favonius Warbow instead of using the Sacrificial. While the Sacrificial is very nice, especially for a cryo team because you can generate cryo particles, which are more valuable than just flat energy particles, at least for cryo characters. The Favonius Warbow gives you more energy recharge, and it just ends up being a better general weapon if you don't run Diona in a cryo or freeze team. And having only a 27% crit rate is actually fine with the Favonius Warbow because you typically want crit for that passive to proc. But holding Diona's skill gives you 5 Icy Paws that shoot out instead of just 2 with the tap skill. And each of these little Icy Paws has their own independent crit rate. Meaning that when you use her hold skill, even with a 27% crit rate, you still have a high probability of proccing the Favonius Warbow passive. I'm telling you this because I would probably recommend running Diona with Tighnari. It's really kind of unfun to run a charge shot character without a shield, so I would probably do something like Tighnari, Fischl, Kuki Shinobu, and Diona just for comfort. However, you can also put someone like the Dendro Traveler in this team too. Otherwise, Diona is just a very nice and comfortable support. I would definitely level her up, level her skill, and her burst. You can completely ignore her normal attacks. Definitely change out this cryo damage bonus for an HP Goblet so you can make her shield stronger, and you'll have a nice defensive utility support. Now let's move on to the last character in your list, Mona. So it looks like Mona is your Thrilling Tales holder, so it looks like she would be someone who would help on a freeze team, probably with Diona and potentially Sucrose. When you build Mona, you do want to go for the 4-piece emblem set, which it looks like you're doing, and I would recommend going a crit headpiece, hydro damage goblet, and energy recharge sands. For talent priority, you want to level her burst first, then her skill, and you don't need to level her normal attacks. Mona is often the solo hydro in a team, so you want to run a lot of energy recharge on her. But she actually benefits quite a lot from energy recharge more than normal characters because not only does it help her get her elemental burst back quicker, she also gains bonus hydro damage by having more energy recharge. But right now I'm going to suggest some teams for you, and I would not actually recommend using Mona on these teams. Your first team is a Hu Tao team. Now I would normally recommend running Hu Tao with a shielder, but I think it's more important for your Tighnari team. So instead I'm going to recommend you sort of an old school Hu Tao team that does very well, but is a little bit more difficult to play. That team is Hu Tao, Xingqiu, Sucrose, and Amber. The idea behind this team is that there's not a lot of ways to swirl Pyro with a Hu Tao team because the characters that you can swirl Pyro off of in most cases either apply too much Pyro off field and they can eat Hu Tao's vaporizes, which reduce her damage significantly, and if you try to swirl Pyro after you infuse Hu Tao, you automatically end her Pyro infusion and that messes up your whole rotation. But by using a character like Amber and then using her burst, you apply a lot of Pyro very quickly, but then Hu Tao can swirl it and then it's not going to be persistent like you would have with a character like Xiangling. So the idea is use Amber's elemental burst and give her something like the instructor set to boost your team's elemental mastery. That not only gives more elemental mastery for Sucrose and Hu Tao, which makes them do more damage, but then when you switch to Sucrose to swirl the Pyro, you reduce the Pyro resistance of those enemies quite a lot thanks to the 4-piece Viridescent set. Then you switch to Xingqiu, use his skill burst and then skill again if your sacrificial sword procs, and finally switch to Hu Tao, infuse her attacks with Pyro, and charge attack with amplified vaporized damage from your instructor set and the Sucrose swirl. Again, this does not have a shielder, which is normally very nice for a Hu Tao team, but it is a very strong team and it does work very well. For the next team, I would recommend Tighnari, Fischl, Kuki Shinobu, and Diona. Most of your damage is going to be coming from Tighnari and Fischl, however Kuki Shinobu with a lot of EM can also be contributing a good amount of damage. Diona is there basically just for support and her shield. Luckily, she doesn't apply a lot of cryo, so she's not really going to mess up any of your elemental reactions. Giving her something like a Favonius Warbow is nice for your entire team. Though the only characters that really care about using their elemental burst when it's off cooldown are Fischl to replace Oz, and Tighnari so he can deal a little more dendro damage. Just build the characters as I suggested, and the team rotation is pretty simple. Start with Oz and Kuki Shinobu's ring for potential healing and some extra electro application, switch to Diona, put out your shield, and then go in with Tighnari, use his skill, do some charge attacks, use his elemental burst, and you'll be on field with him for several seconds until it's time to switch out and use your other character's skills and burst once again. Overall, the Hu Tao team is a lot stronger than the Tighnari team, but if you can manage to pick up a character like Nahida or Alhaitham, this team will be a lot stronger. And overall, that's how you can progress more in the Abyss. Your characters are pretty good, you seem to know how to build them, you just have to execute building them a little bit more. You also have some good team options, and a lot of the upgrades that you could use are free-to-play craftable weapons, so that's always nice. Keep on developing these characters just like you're doing, and you'll be able to crush the Abyss in no time.